The fall of Rome wasn't a single dramatic event, a sudden cataclysm that erased an empire overnight. It was a slow, generational process, a gradual decline that unfolded across decades and centuries, impacting every facet of Roman life. There was no single day when the empire simply vanished in a puff of smoke. No singular moment of destruction that marked its definitive end. Instead, Rome unraveled over centuries, its vast territories, intricate systems, and societal structures slowly fragmenting and transforming. The famous date of 476 AD, often cited as the end of the Western Roman Empire, when Romulus Augustulus, the last Roman emperor in the West, was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer, is just a convenient marker, a symbolic endpoint chosen by historians to help us understand a much more complex and protracted decline. For most Romans living at the time, life continued, albeit under increasingly challenging circumstances. Their lives were marked by ongoing crises, political instability, economic hardship, and gradual cultural change, a slow but relentless transformation of their world. It wasn't a sudden collapse, but a slow, grinding process of adaptation and attrition. The empire's decline was a slow erosion of political stability, with infighting, corruption, and weak leadership undermining the foundations of Roman governance. It was also an erosion of economic strength, as trade routes were disrupted, inflation soared, and the empire struggled to maintain its vast infrastructure, and military power stretched thin across vast borders. Rome's end was less a conquest by invading armies, a dramatic overthrow of power, more a system running out of energy and belief. Its institutions weakened from within, its citizens losing faith in its ability to provide security and prosperity. Cities shrank as populations dwindled and people migrated to the countryside in search of sustenance and safety. Frontiers weakened, becoming increasingly vulnerable to barbarian incursions and raids, as the Roman legions struggled to defend the vast borders, and old certainties faded as traditional Roman values and beliefs were challenged by new religions and philosophies. But even amidst all this upheaval, people still called themselves Romans, clinging to their identity and traditions. The grand structures, the magnificent monuments of Roman power and ingenuity, didn't vanish overnight. They decayed slowly, weathered by time and neglect, their stones crumbling and their grandeur fading. They were repurposed, their materials scavenged and reused to build new structures, reflecting the changing needs and priorities of a new era. Or they were simply abandoned, left to the elements, gradually reclaimed by nature, silent witnesses to a bygone age. Roman ways blended with new cultures, as Germanic tribes and other groups settled within the former empire, creating a hybrid society. This fusion of Roman and barbarian traditions laid the groundwork for the Middle Ages, shaping the political, social, and cultural landscape of Europe for centuries to come. The end of Rome was not an apocalypse, a sudden and complete annihilation, but a long, painful transition, a slow and often agonizing process of transformation and adaptation. To truly understand Rome's fall, to grasp the nuances of its decline, think of it as a landscape slowly reshaped by time and human action, a gradual transformation rather than a sudden cataclysm. The story is as much about continuity and transformation, about the ways in which Roman traditions and institutions survived and evolved, as it is about collapse, about the dramatic events and forces that led to the empire's eventual demise. The crisis of the 3rd century, a period of immense turmoil and upheaval. It was Rome's near-fatal dress rehearsal for collapse, a time when the very foundations of the empire were shaken to their core. The vast territories, once symbols of Roman strength, became vulnerable and fragmented. Civil wars erupted, tearing the empire apart from within. It all began after Emperor Alexander Severus's assassination, a spark that ignited widespread chaos and instability. The throne became a deadly prize, with over 20 men claiming the throne, each vying for power in a brutal and relentless struggle. And tragically, most met violent ends, their reigns cut short by assassination, betrayal, and the ruthless ambition of others. Plagues, like the devastating plague of Cyprian, swept across the empire. These epidemics killed millions, leaving a trail of devastation and despair in their wake. The widespread disease crippled the population and decimated the ranks of the army, leaving Rome vulnerable to external threats. Economic chaos followed, exacerbating the already dire situation. Trade faltered as the infrastructure crumbled and the seas became unsafe. The currency was debased, its value plummeting as the government desperately tried to cope with the financial strain. and as a result, inflation soared to unprecedented levels, crippling the economy and impoverishing the populace. With internal conflicts raging and resources stretched thin, the borders were left exposed. Roman armies, once the shield of the empire, were now fighting each other in a bloody struggle for power, leaving the frontiers undefended against invaders. Germanic tribes, sensing Rome's weakness, pressed against the Rhine and Danube frontiers. And to the east, the Sasanian Persians, a powerful and ambitious empire, posed an even greater threat. Both saw an opportunity and exploited Rome's weakness, launching devastating raids and incursions into Roman territory. The unthinkable happened. Emperor Valerian was captured by the Persians, a humiliation that sent shockwaves throughout the Roman world. In the face of such overwhelming challenges, parts of the empire began to break away, declaring their independence from Rome. These regions formed the rival states, further fragmenting the empire and plunging it into deeper chaos. Eventually, a series of strong soldier emperors emerged, men who rose through the ranks of the army and managed to reunite the empire through force and determination. But the crisis of the 3rd century left deep scars on Roman society, economy, and its political institutions. The crisis exposed the old system's fragility, revealing its inherent weaknesses and vulnerabilities. It created a desperate need for reform, a fundamental restructuring of the empire's institutions and governance. The solutions that followed, while providing a temporary respite and buying the empire time to recover, would also plant the seeds of future decline, setting the stage for the eventual collapse of the Western Roman Empire. The late 3rd century AD was a period of immense turmoil for the Roman Empire. Decades of civil war, economic instability, and constant barbarian incursions had brought the once mighty empire to its knees. It seemed as though the very foundations of Roman civilization were crumbling. Amidst this chaos, Diocletian rose from the ranks, a strong-willed emperor determined to save Rome with radical reforms. He recognized that the old system was broken and that only drastic measures could prevent total collapse. His most significant reform was to split the empire into East and West, creating what is known as the Tetrarchy. Each half was ruled by 2 emperors, an Augustus and a Caesar, hoping to end civil war by creating a clear line of succession and ensure stability through shared power. This was a revolutionary concept, a departure from the traditional model of a single emperor holding absolute authority. Diocletian's economic fixes, like the Edict on Maximum Prices, intended to combat inflation, backfired spectacularly. Instead of stabilizing the economy, it led to widespread black markets and shortages as merchants refused to sell goods at artificially low prices. Essential goods disappeared from the marketplace, further destabilizing the empire. To ensure a steady flow of revenue, he overhauled the tax system, making it more predictable. However, this predictability came at a cost, as the taxes became crushingly rigid and burdensome, especially for the common people. To enforce these policies, the bureaucracy ballooned in size, becoming increasingly expensive and, unfortunately, corrupt. Roman society grew increasingly rigid. Sons were legally obligated to follow their fathers' professions, effectively locking people into their social and economic roles from birth. This stifled innovation and individual ambition. Diocletian's reforms did manage to stabilize the empire, at least for a time, providing a temporary respite from the chaos. But this stability came at a significant cost. The state became increasingly authoritarian, with the emperor wielding immense power and suppressing dissent. Taxes soared to support the massive bureaucracy and military, and social mobility effectively vanished, trapping people in their inherited stations. The peasantry, as always, bore the brunt of these policies, struggling under the weight of heavy taxation and forced labor. The rigid social and economic structure made adaptation to changing circumstances nearly impossible, hindering long-term growth and resilience. In the short term, Diocletian saved the empire from immediate collapse and fragmentation. However, in doing so, he left it chronically ill, weakened by its own internal structures. His solutions, while initially effective, ultimately created a top-heavy, oppressive system that was fundamentally unable to adapt to future challenges. In essence, the cure for chaos became a new, slow-acting poison, setting the stage for the empire's eventual decline. Rome's once vibrant, interconnected economy began to unravel long before the empire's fall. Civil wars, invasions, and inflation made long-distance trade risky and unprofitable. Cities shrank as elites fled to rural estates, and public buildings fell into ruin. The economy became local and agrarian, centered on self-sufficient estates. Currency debasement destroyed trust in money. Barter replaced cash in many regions. Taxes were collected in kind, not coin, a sign of economic regression. The glue binding the empire dissolved, replaced by isolated rural economies. Great landowners became local power brokers, while small farmers became tenant laborers. This shift foreshadowed medieval manorialism. The economic breakdown fragmented society, leaving a poorer, disconnected world. The Roman army, once a disciplined citizen force, changed dramatically by the late empire. Demographic decline forced Rome to recruit barbarians from outside its borders. These foreign soldiers often owed loyalty to their generals, not the empire. The army's culture and discipline eroded, replaced by the customs of new recruits. Rome relied on outsiders to defend it from other outsiders, a dangerous paradox. Barbarian generals interfered in politics, sometimes turning against Rome itself. The army's transformation reflected deeper problems: high taxes, rigid society, and declining civic spirit. When crisis struck, Rome's army was a patchwork of war bands, not a unified defense. Rome's fall is often blamed on barbarian invasions, but the truth was more complex. For centuries, Rome managed its neighbors through diplomacy, trade, and force. Many barbarians wanted to join Rome, not destroy it. The arrival of the Huns pushed Gothic tribes into Roman territory, leading to disaster at Adrianople in 378 AD. After Adrianople, Rome settled large groups of barbarians within its borders as allies, but these groups became powerful and independent. Over time, Vandals, Visigoths, and others carved out kingdoms inside the empire. These new rulers adopted Roman ways, laws, and language, ruling over Roman populations. The fall was often a hostile takeover, not total destruction. Roman civilization persisted under new management. The Western Empire's machinery was seized, not erased. Amid Rome's turmoil, a spiritual revolution transformed the empire. Traditional Roman religion faded as people sought new faiths, none more successful than Christianity. Christianity's promise of salvation and community appealed to a world in crisis. Despite persecution, the faith spread relentlessly. Constantine's conversion and Theodosius's decrees made Christianity the state religion. Pagan temples closed, the old gods were outlawed, the church became a unifying force, preserving Roman culture as the state collapsed. But religious disputes also created new divisions and crises of identity. The rise of Christianity fundamentally changed what it meant to be Roman. While the West fell, the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, endured for centuries. The East was richer, more urbanized, and had a stronger tax base. Constantinople's strategic location and formidable defenses made it nearly impregnable. The East faced threats, but its borders were shorter and easier to defend. Barbarian migrations hit the West hardest. The East often paid invaders to go elsewhere. The East's political and social cohesion helped avoid the chaos that doomed the West. Strong emperors and a professional army kept order. Religious controversies were managed by a powerful central authority. The East's resources and unity allowed it to weather storms that overwhelmed the West. The Western Roman Empire didn't fall in a crash. It died like an ancient tree, slowly decaying from within. Its economic roots withered, trade dried up, and cities shrank. The army, patched with foreign recruits, lost its strength and loyalty. Political structures hollowed out, reforms only delaying the inevitable. The storms, barbarian invasions, were the final blow, not the root cause. Yet Rome's legacy endured. Law, language, and the church became seeds for medieval Europe. The end was not erasure, but transformation. Rome's fall enriched the soil for new growth. The process was messy, gradual, and world-changing. The consequences of Rome's slow death still shape our world today.